Dylan Parham at guard?
I think we'll do what we did last year. We'll rep him at all three. I mean, I think that was a good plan, and it improves his, I'd say, overall value. So definitely, obviously, I think the hope is we'll improve, from year one to year two, but also be ready to go in case we needed him, at center, just like we did in a pinch last year.
Josh, is a player in this draft, Jalen Carter, who obviously has some baggage, and it's a little bit raw when it comes to Las Vegas, considering some of the recent history that's happened. How do you guys kind of assess all of that with what happened and what's happened here in Las Vegas?
I think the big thing is to really do our work and know the truth of everything. I think there's a lot of things that could be said or speculated about that you got to be careful about pinning on somebody. I think the reality for us is, our interest in the draft is always to make sure that we know how we feel about the character of the human being that we're talking about, not just a rumor. So we'll do everything we have to do to make sure that not only with Jalen, but any other player, we understand exactly what the truth is, what we're talking about, who we're getting if we select them. And there's still work to be done, I'd say, across the board in the draft on that. We still have, more than a month here to go. So, that'll all play itself out. But I don't rush to judgment on any of those things, because I think sometimes when you do that, you'll make a mistake.
If that process takes you to a good place where you feel, okay, this can work out, any hesitation at all to?
No. I mean, if you feel like, again, we want to draft players that will represent the Raiders both on and off the field the right way, and we have a certain standard that we believe in. So does Mr. Davis. He sets the bar, and so to me, once we've identified, and gone through our process, if we feel like the player, look, if we don't feel like we're safe to draft somebody, we'll just take them off the board, and not even include that as part of our process. So once the process is done, whoever's left, then they've all been approved, and we'll go forward with our process in the draft. But we still have some time here before that happens.
You referenced it inside there, Josh, about whether you would draft for need or best player available. Does that philosophy change at all depending upon where you're picking? Because last year you didn't pick till the third round, but now you got a top 7.
Yeah, I think for us, what we've talked about is honestly, like, if it's a tie, you know what I mean, then you might lean towards something that you're kind of a little bit more deficient in. I think you have to have something that's a tiebreaker. And so for us, is if we say that, hey, this guy's graded here and this guy's graded here, but we don't have a lot here, like, should we pass a player that's really talented at a different position? It's never been a really good philosophy to do that, because if you add a really good football player, I mean, you're really not doing yourself, really that much harm. You know what I mean? If you need to do something later on in training camp or something to patch up a position for another year, then maybe you do that. But for us, we're going to try to evaluate the best players we can, and then when each pick comes up, try to make a good choice. And if there's a tie, maybe we, like you said, maybe we lean something where we need it.
A little bit of reaction on social media the other day. These pro day things, it kind of happens like you and Dave specifically weren't at Will Levis's pro day. Is there anything?
We were with Will the night before.
Okay.
So there's just some scheduling things. We had our Bo was there, Champ was there. So, I mean, we can't be like this coming up this week too. There's a bunch of them on the same day. So it's just impossible to, really kind of logistically be everywhere. We were down there the night before. We're with Will, spending a lot of quality time with him, just trying to get to know these guys. Quarterback is such a position that is about fit, and it's not easy to determine that always. And so I think the relationship part of it is part of that. That's why we went down there quickly and did that. And then Bubba and Champ were there at the workout. We get all the video, so we'll have all that too. And then we have the opportunity to Sean to bring him in for the 30 visits. So we'll get more time with these guys too. So it's not just quarterback. I know everybody's, these places we went have multiple players at multiple positions that I'd say we have a significant interest in. So the quarterback position gets the headlines, I know, but there's some other guys at these schools that are really quality players that we'd have an interest in.
You've worked with multiple different styles of quarterbacks, and there's multiple different styles of quarterbacks in this upcoming draft. Is there any kind of preference that you have, or is it just...
No, I think honestly, like, you look for a guy who's, I always thought you got to be able to think, throw, lead, learn. And, if you can do those 4 things, that's a great place to start. You know what I mean? Because in the National Football League, like, those are the guys that honestly, when you look at the last few games of our season every year, I mean, generally speaking, those guys are doing those things at a high level, and some of them at an elite level. And so, the other thing that I would say, Q, is that all these quarterbacks, and I've been evaluating them for quite a while now, they're all at different stages of the development. And so, Anthony's at a different place than Bryce, and Bryce is a different place than Will, and Will, is a different place than Hendon Hooker, and Hendon Hooker's a different place than CJ, and CJ's a different place than Hayner and O'Connell. And I mean, there's a lot of different guys. Some of them have played more football, some of them have played less. And the more they play and the more they grow and the more they develop, you might reach their ceiling, and their ceiling might be a different place than they're at now. Most of them are. And so some of this is you got to look at what you see, the traits that they have, and then you got to project them into your system with your development and say, where's this guy going to be 3 years from now? Because you're not drafting a player and saying, okay, we're happy with where he's at today. We think we're going to be happy with where he's going to be at 3 years from now because we feel like he has a chance to really survive and be a good player.
When you were in New England and had Tom, and a lot of times you guys are drafting further down in the draft, how focused and zeroed in were you on quarterbacks compared to like now where there's probably a need and, you're drafting high?
We did it really the same way. There might have been a couple times, Vinny, where we knew a guy was going to go like really high in the draft, and we knew we weren't going to be able to. But for me, I always looked at those guys anyway as an opportunity because we're probably going to play them at some point, and you never know if your work that you do now 4 years later comes back and you go, okay, we add this guy, and I did my research then and kind of I'm familiar with the player. So I've always gone through that process, and honestly, we drafted quite a few of them. I mean, from Castle to O'Connell to Hoyer to Mallett to Garoppolo to Brissett to Stidham, to Matt. We've always kind of been in the quarterback business, if you would, even though we didn't necessarily need a starter. You're looking for a solid backup. And like I said in there, I love the idea of having a young player eventually be your backup quarterback, where every year you're not looking for another veteran guy to put on a 1-year deal to keep being your backup quarterback over and over and over again, And so I think we've seen some dividends doing it that way and really like that process. And if we can find a guy that fits that description this year, I'd love to do it.
How specifically then has signing Jimmy changed the philosophy, if at all, about taking a quarterback early in the draft?
If we feel like the guy's worth it, Paul, I think we would do it. You know what I mean? And just like I said, it doesn't say anything about anybody. It's just he's a really good player at the most important position in football. And so is making your quarterback room stronger or a strength of your team a bad thing? In our opinion, it's not. You know what I mean? It's a good thing. So whether that happens or not, I don't know. There's a lot that could be done between now and then. But if a good player at that position falls, like that's what happened with Jimmy. We took him in the second round, and and we had Tom, and it was like, okay, this guy's available, and it's like, holy cow, like let's get him. So I'd say at that position, whenever a player, if you feel like he's worth it, it's worth taking him.
You just listed a bunch of guys too. Is that your order of preference?
Say it again. I listed them all out of order, so don't read anything into that. There's still, I would say, there's still some work to be done on that part of it. But as Q said, there's very few of them that are the same. This class is really, I'd say it's pretty unique in that there's not many of them that resemble somebody else. And so doing our work on them, and I think they're all on different stages of their development. So it's an interesting group.
You mentioned players taking a leap in year 2 of your system. Do you see that being the case with Hunter Renfrow?
I would love to believe that. Yes, and again, Hunter battled through the concussion, the oblique, so it wasn't I wouldn't say it was a clean year relative to him in terms of his health. So I think, just talked to him, maybe a couple weeks ago. I mean, it seems like he's healthy. Seems like he's in a good place in terms of working out and being ready to go in terms of the off season. I just love for him to have an opportunity to be healthy and go through the whole off season and then into training camp, and feel good about going into the season health wise, and then trying to stay healthy and see what he can do. I mean, obviously he was a big reason I was excited about being here. I've had a long history of these kind of guys, that I've had a chance to work with, and was super excited, and still am super excited about it.
What a few years we've seen a couple quarterbacks that were more in the first round, more so off their physical traits, Josh Allen types, Trey Lance types, and there's another one this year that's probably going to go in the first round, and Anthony Richardson. When there's a player like that, how do you go when he only has a 1 year experience, for example?
Yeah.
How do you go about projecting what you think they are and what they could be at the next level?
Learn as much about them as you can. Really get to know the person in as many ways as we're able to. So meeting him, being at the pro day, having him in our building, talking to him at the combine, like that process has already started. And this is a unique person now. In terms of his athletic skills and ability, what he's able to do. These are rare, as we saw at the combine. So you got to take a look at those things, and you also have to factor in what you think you want to have them do, if they're playing for you, And when we did Lamar a few years ago, the conversation was not going to be the same. At that time, I think we had Tom, and it would have been Tom and Lamar. And it's like, those two guys aren't going to be doing, we're not asking Tom. We could ask Lamar to do some of the things that Tom, but we're not going to ask Tom to do what Lamar can do. You know what I mean? So there's some different, conversations that need to be had about how you use a player too that has a really specific skill set and very unique talent, and AR definitely has that.
We were talking about second-year guys. How about Matthew Butler and Neil Farrell? They didn't get a lot of burn in their rookie year. How much do they need to step up this year?
Yeah, we're excited. Both of them have already been there, on their own with our strength guys, which they're allowed to do, and just really trying to put in all the time and effort that they need to, I'd say, start at a better place than they finished, which sometimes is a huge key for guys going from year one to year two. But, invested, in the defensive line last year a little bit in the draft, and obviously if those two guys can have a really good leap here into year two, that would help us for sure.
Jermaine is listed as a guard tackle still. Is there still a possibility that he could play guard, and could Thayer maybe play guard?
We talked to Jermaine as we were going through that process and bringing him back, and it's, one of the unique traits about Jermaine is he's like one of the few guys in the league that, right tackle, played left tackle, played right guard, all in games last year in the same season. And there's not that many players that you can say that about. And so Jermaine's versatility, his ability to play right and left, his ability mentally to be able to handle that because the calls are a little different on each side of the ball, that's a value, And so we'll see how it shakes out, Vinny. We don't ever go in there and, like you guys saw last year when you go into training camp and just put them in one spot and leave them there and never move them. Like, I don't really think that's a great way to go, because eventually, as we saw during the course of the season, we were going to need somebody at, Dylan went from guard to center. Dylan played on both sides of the center at guard. Jermaine played at tackle and guard, So there's a lot of moving parts that usually you have to, go through during the course of the season. And, preparing those guys for that early is better than trying to throw them in there at the last second and they've never really practiced it. So we'll use all the versatility we can with those guys, give them an opportunity to compete in there, and see how it all shakes out.
Guys, thank you guys.